we're not sure about, or votes in doubt, or election races in doubt. Let's put it that way. At least on the big races side. So nationally is where you're really going to have the cliffhangers. We'll see. There's some big races. Can the Democrats take the Senate? Can they take the House? We will see. There are paths for both avenues, both options. Although the Democrats had some work to do, so we'll see if getting Barack Obama and all the other big Democratic names that were crisscrossing the country here over the last few days, we'll see if it worked. I don't know if you heard Barack Obama in recent days. He could not speak, hoarse as could be, out there on the campaign trail still yelling, delivering speeches. But it's tough. That campaign life is tough. You're flying all around. You're giving big, energetic speeches. It takes a lot out of people. And he could barely speak by the time it was all over. President Trump, of course, was out on the Republican side campaigning in very big states as well, kind of crisscrossing the country himself. So it is an all-out push. It's very important. These things mean a lot, and we'll see how it all happens. Of course, you get your celebrities, too, encouraging you to vote. I see Taylor Swift very big on the kind of dipping her toe into the politics thing for the first time in a long time. First time ever. She's young, of course, but she's getting political a little bit and wanted people to get out there and vote. And I know she made a few comments about a month ago that kind of showed where she stands politically, and she's out there today encouraging people to vote. So they say, I remember reading something like a week after she made her first political statements, and it said like some outrageous number of how many new voters they expect to be gained, new young voters, because of Taylor Swift. You can imagine how big that number might be, but pretty crazy. Anyway, it is election day here in Massachusetts, election day nationwide, and a very important day. So again, get out there and vote if you haven't done it already. And for those of you, I know we get a lot of young listeners on this show who are not old enough to vote. When that time comes, don't miss it. Don't take it for granted. Don't be lazy. A lot of people don't vote just because they're lazy. And it's easy to be lazy on a day like today when it's rainy and cold, and I don't know, you're at home watching a movie. But get out there and do it. A lot of people fought for your right to do it, and it's just you got to do it. Let's put it that way. Don't miss it. So when we come back, well, Bruce Menin, he's the vice chair of the school committee. Like I said, he's got his hands in a bunch of different things. So we will get him in the house in just a moment. And one last thing, don't forget Twitter. Always follow us on Twitter at Joppa Afternoons. That's at Joppa, Joppa Afternoons on Twitter. Great way to stay interactive with the show, and do that today if you wish. Say hello. Do all those things. So keep it here. We'll be right back with Bruce Menin in just a moment. My name is Drew Moholland, and this is Afternoon Drive on Joppa Radio. All right, welcome back to Afternoon Drive here on Joppa Radio. My name is Drew Moholland. Hope you're all having a good Tuesday, a good election day. It is ugly out, but as we look outside, the polling place near us here at the Joppa Afternoon Studios is it's getting busy. Long line of traffic coming in, so it's about that time. Things picking up here late in the afternoon. People getting out of work early, or I don't know, whatever they're doing. It tends to get busier as that post-lunchtime crowd and all that stuff. So open till 8 o'clock tonight, of course, the polls. So get out there and vote. Very important. My guest today, good day to have this guest on, Bruce Menin, an elected official, the vice chair of the Port School Committee. Bruce, thanks for coming on. How are you?
My pleasure. Good.
It's good to meet you. Yeah, first time we've had you in, so this is very exciting.
It is.
Indeed. Well, you already get out and vote today?
I voted this morning at about 10 o'clock. I didn't have to wait online.
Yep.
I voted my conscience.
There you go. It's probably good advice for everybody, right?
Yeah, it is.
There is. Indeed. Well, there's a lot of course, every community has their own things. I see some different signs out here from Newburyport than, of course, I see in Danvers, just on the local level. But one thing that we all have is those very important ballot questions, the 3 ballot questions. I know the one that's being talked about very much is the nurses question, and I thought that's interesting because I have nurses in my family, and they're, you pick brains for how these people in the industry feel. They're split on it. It's unbelievable. It's kind of a great ballot question. I mean, they say it's not written perfectly. I guess that's you're hearing which ballot questions are very few, but it's interesting to see an issue like that where people in the industry are.
Yeah, well, there's this whole economic side to it,
right?
That drives it. I mean, the other questions don't really have that factor to it,
right?
So who's going to make money? How many nurses are we going to hire? What is a legitimate caseload for them? Those are all like important questions, but it's easy to attach dollar signs to those. Certainly, that's why a lot of people are invested one way or the other.
Exactly, and of course, it's something that you might not think about it until you have something happen to you, but it is something that does affect everybody. Right. It's healthcare. It's
right. Right. It is.
So
it is, and it's sort of been healthcare has been a national topic. There are some people who wish it wasn't a national topic, and there are some people who think it should be. So
it's certainly always a popular one when you're talking about healthcare. But you yourself are an elected official, so that must be quite a process to. When you get in, it must be pretty rewarding. Well, thank you, everybody. Huh?
Yeah. Well, I learned some very important lessons. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that when I was first elected, the first 2 times I ran for school committee, even though in local elections the party doesn't really matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican because you're not running on a party ticket, I was a Green candidate. I was a Green elected candidate for the first 2 times, and then had a disagreement with the National Green Party.
No. But tell us more. No.
Well, it's just the National Greens and the local Greens are 2 different groups. They're not combined, and the National Greens had some practices that didn't make any sense. That if you walked into them and said, "I would like to run for Senate in Pennsylvania, and I will fund myself," they'd say, "Great, you'll be our candidate."
Yep.
And that happened in Pennsylvania, and it turns out that the guy who walked in and got the Green nomination to run for senator walked in with $95,000 he'd gotten from Rick Santorum, who was running for Senate. So I talked about how that was sucking all the air out of the local Greens. I mean, I believe that any party you need people who understand how government works and can do it. You don't start by running for senator first. You start by running for school committee and town council and city council, and you get the experience of working in government, and you hold those ideals that are Green ideals, and then suddenly it becomes, well, that's not it's not a Green party. It's Bruce. Man, I know Bruce, and I learned actually, it's very interesting. I learned a really wonderful lesson early on. I think it might have been the 2nd or 3rd time that I ran. I thought that I had pissed off everybody, and that I did not stand a good chance of getting reelected. So it's sort of my nature to to challenge that, and I decided I would go door to door in Ward 6, which has traditionally not been one of the areas that I get the most support in. To ask people, so I'm knocking on doors, and I knocked on this.
What are you saying? What don't you like about me?
Right, exactly. Well, I knocked on the doors, and this guy answered. This guy who was a lifelong Newburyport resident, and I said, "Hi, I'm Bruce Menin. I'm running for re-election for school committee." He looked at me and he goes, "Oh, I know who you are. I seen you on cable TV. I watch the cable TV. I seen you on cable TV. I don't often agree with you." I said, "Well, here's your opportunity." And he said, No, it's okay. I've been watching you. You do your homework. You ask really tough questions, and you don't let those bastards get away with anything. So you'll have my vote, even though I don't often agree with you." And that was a very powerful lesson for an elected official to hear, that if you do your homework, if you stay consistent to a set of ideals, people aren't going to always agree with you, but they will respect that. And that was a very liberating thing for me.
And who knows, but maybe you won his vote.
Maybe I did.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was willing to say, I don't have to agree with you. Just do your job. Just do it right.
It's interesting. Did you enjoy the campaigning aspect of it? Do you like knocking on doors? Do you like shaking hands?
Yeah.
It can be a grind, right?
It can be. I like it. For the school committee, you don't really kind of do a lot. I mean, it's interesting. I've often described myself as a steroid for democracy, because when my name is on the ballot, there are like 5 or 6 people running for 3 seats. When my name's not on the ballot and there's a school committee election, it's 3 people running for 3 seats every time.
Gotcha.
So I always, and I think I'd rather have it my way, the way that it goes with me, because I see the role of being a school committee member as being a facilitator for a public conversation about who we are, who we want to be as a culture, who we want to be as a community. So as many people as can get to the table to share in that conversation, I think is good for the community.
Absolutely.
So I like the debates. I like the having to explain myself and explain my positions.
The Secretary of State Galvin was predicting even with some not so great weather out there today, some big voter turnouts across the Commonwealth today, and it seems like the young people, which it seems that kind of bar is being set at around my age, 31, 32, all the way down. People who have notoriously not voted in last elections. It seems like that number, they're expecting a big turnout this time around. Probably not surprising when you have divisiveness in Washington and across the country. But it seems like that number may push things up a little bit. We'll see. You never know. But that they tend to be in the right ballpark on that. Your thoughts on that? Getting young people getting involved here.
Yeah, well, I've got skin in the game, because not only am I a school committee member and have taken on the obligation of making sure that the civics education we're providing students in Newburyport is worthwhile and takes and is good, and they understand their role in a community. I have a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old, soon to be both. And my 20-year-old actually voted for, this is the first election he's ever voted in.
It's kind of a big moment, isn't it?
It is a big,
I remember the first time I walked in. It's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, it's I'm very proud of them, and we've always been sort of we've always been involved in political conversations all of my life. I started out in the Stone Age when people were first running for office, handing out leaflets when I was 9 years old for candidates that I supported. So we've always had sort of an ongoing conversation about, my kids are frustrated because they see that we've really screwed things up. We've really made it very difficult to move forward as a community, as a world. They're going to have to clean up the mess that we've made. We don't seem to be able to do that very well. So they're frustrated with that. But I've always seen, I kind of buy what Tip O'Neill said, that politics is the art of the possible. Politics is, to me, democracy is about compromise. Yeah. And when we don't have that ability to compromise anymore, things really go south very, very quickly. Yeah. I've learned some really important lessons as a school committee member. I was a bomb thrower when I first got elected. Yeah. Now I understand that things as much as I would prefer revolution, it's evolution.
My way or the highway is not always the right play.
No, it's not. It absolutely isn't.
You said you're proud of the kids on the voting front. Does that mean you didn't have to get out there and say, did you have to remind them? Or
No, not at all.
That's great, right?
Not at all. No, they asked me to facilitate their getting absentee ballots, and they both were.
Oh, nice.
We had some conversations. I don't tell my kids who to vote for, because I like to think that the values they were raised with are going to make those candidates that they want to vote for clear to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't have to talk to them at all.
It's always good to talk it out. I find especially on the ballot questions, because sometimes if you've been into the voting booth today, it is, I mean, even if you know what you're thinking, or you think you know what you're going to do going in, it's always good to like read them again, like, because there's a lot of there's a lot of words to some of those, and some of it is legal jargon and all that. So
the culture has, I mean, it's astonishing how dramatically the culture has changed. Al Gore talks about how no generation will have seen the kind of changes we've seen in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
That it's amazing. And, the ballot question for my daughter, the nurse's ballot question was important. For my son, he talked a lot about the transgender ballot question. And I'm finding that their generation just sees the world very differently than even me growing up did. And I think that is a real source of optimism for me. I'm like very happy about it because, they're not about what they celebrate differences, and they're not about what keeps us apart. They're about what we have in common. And that just continues, to be part of the way they converse about politics. Absolutely.
And we'll see if the young people do come out. I hope they do. I mean, I think everybody hopes they do. It's just good for the election process.
It is.
To get the numbers up in general. There was a staggering, the last time around, I forget exactly what that percentage was, but the amount of votes left on the table last time around, and that's always tough for me to see.
Well, for example, we talk about, on the national level, we talk about politics being about the base and what's the base. And when you really sort of analyze what happened in the last election, the base represents about 30% of the total population that is making these decisions about who should be in office, because there's about 50% of the population that's sitting home and not voting and not engaging. I've always fought for transparency in the work that we're doing in the schools. My philosophy is that if you give people all the information they need to make a good decision, 9 times out of 10 you get a good decision. Sometimes you don't, but 9 times out of 10, if you're withholding information or only giving partial information, you don't really get good decisions that work in the long run for the community. They work for a few people, but not for the community. So
play the percentages, 9 out of 10.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I want to, after the break too, I want to get into a little bit of what the actual school committee is dealing with. I do want to get on one thing though. When we were talking about campaigning and you knocking on doors and the lessons that you mentioned you learned, I was thinking about a younger guy that from my district back in Danvers who's challenging a longtime state rep today. And I don't think he has, the experts say, doesn't have much of a chance of winning, but I did hear him speak recently, and it was interesting. He's a Republican in a very Democratic Danvers, and a notoriously Democratic Danvers, and he was mentioning that he might not win here, but the lessons learned on the campaign trail, that what he's learned as a young politician here will set him up or will make him a better politician going forward. Probably not an easy game to just walk into and get people to buy into you.
But you can catch lightning in a bottle if you I think if people, again, if they see you as honest, they see you as thoughtful, and they don't see you in anybody's pocket. I mean, the fact that I ask hard questions was a clue to this guy that I'm not in anybody's pocket. That to me, what it's about for me is what's in the best interest of the kids. And that's about as political as it gets for me. And that's what my job is. I try to steer clear of a lot of the other issues that are percolating in the community if I don't feel that they affect kids or they don't affect what the schools are doing.
Stay focused on what matters.
Stay focused on what matters, and I think that that's good. And then you can get good at it. You know, you build relationships.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm sure you're like me. I do hate that. I hate hearing, whether it be a young person, I hear adults say it myself. Can't get to the polls because vote really doesn't matter in Massachusetts.
Right,
you know,
it
does.
It absolutely,
it does.
It absolutely does.
I remember my grandfather, and I'm sure many of you out there have people who, maybe relatives who fought in wars or whatever. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's those freedoms. And I remember thinking this is one of my grandfather's favorite days ever is election day. Never missed an election. Would stand out there, would have his coffee, would shake hands. It was like I don't know, Super Bowl or something, you know?
It's a great day. Well, you know, it's interesting because on the one hand, there are these very partisan pressures to suppress people's ability to vote.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, there are states that are opening up early voting, and they're finding that more people come out to vote.
Yeah.
You've got early voting. You've got those opportunities. I tend to be with the early voting crowd. I think Election Day should be a day off for everybody.
Yeah. Well,
I think voting should be 24 hours.
There we go. It's one way to get the numbers up.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
All right, Bruce, let's do this. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk a bit about what's going through the school committee right now and some of the other things you get your hands in because, well, there's a lot of that, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff.
We'll be right back. Bruce Menin, our guest, the vice chair of the Port School Committee. Happy voting day out there. Hope you've all gotten to the polls. Don't forget, you have till 8 o'clock tonight, so they'll stay open if there's long lines. But get there on time. Don't leave it to the last minute, and don't be lazy. Get out there. My name is Drew Moholland. This is Afternoon Drive on Chopper Radio. Keep it here. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Afternoon Drive here on Chopper Radio. My name is Drew Moholland. Hope you're all having a good election day. As I look outside, it is boy, it's already getting dark. This is the first show since daylight saving time. Drop the S, people. Be correct there. Daylight saving time. People get very upset when you say that on the radio. It calls in, and people on Twitter, it's saving, not savings. Very sorry, but it's getting dark earlier. Very different. So winter is coming, but it's rainy out there today. Hopefully, it's not affecting the voting numbers. Get out there and vote. We're joined by Bruce Menin, the vice chair of the Port School Committee, and he's nice enougenough to join us here. He's an elected official on Election Day, so we're very thrilled about that. We just had a little bit of a spirited conversation off the air, so let's jump right back into that, Bruce, because it is probably one of the subjects that it really brings the people on both sides of the aisle together. People who are opposed to it are very opposed to it. People who are for it seem to be a lot of the kids are very much for it, and it's school start times. Right. It seems like my very informal poll that I've taken from this particular show is the kids would love to sleep in. I think I would have loved to sleep in back when I was in high school. It seemed like a lot of the coaches are not. I think a lot of the coaches are worried about practice time at the end of the day, but a lot of the studies do show that kids do better when they are more well rested, and starting school later would indeed theoretically make them more well rested. So where do you stand on it?
Well, it raises a lot of very, very interesting questions for the community, I think. Fundamentally, the bottom line is what's in the best interest for kids, and how do we determine what's in the best interest for kids? And the schools, I think, have no choice, because they're an educational facility, to look at the science, look at the data. I know that on a federal level, we are playing fast and loose with science these days, but in our community, in our district, what does the science say? And the studies are unequivocal that starting late for kids at the high school and middle school level, there's not a lot of data on elementary school, but middle school and high school, particularly high school, starting classes after 8:30 in the morning, you begin to see in school districts less anxiety, less need for mental health services, less suicide gestures in kids, less depression. All this is sort of documented, because what the late start actually does, part of it is getting some extra sleep, but even if you don't get extra sleep, it aligns the schedule with the internal clock of adolescents, who, no matter how much you try, you're not going to be ready for algebra at 7:30 in the morning. You're just not there as an adolescent, as an 18, 17, 16-year-old. Your body's not awake. It doesn't move to that kind of alertness. So why would we continue to offer algebra at 7:30 in the morning to kids who aren't ready for it? It doesn't make any sense.
And for the teacher that says, if you start the school day later, kids are just going to stay up later anyway, and you're still going to have the same vicious cycle, the science does not prove that as a whole? Or?
Science doesn't show that. Yeah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't show that. What you're getting, even if kids are staying up later, what the data shows is less anxiety, less depression, less suicidal gesturing. You're seeing higher scores. You're seeing better athletic performance. You're seeing just so many benefits. So it doesn't really matter if you're giving them the extra hour and a half. What you're doing is aligning a schedule to work with their clock.
What about the logistical concerns of you're finishing the school day later, practice times, practice fields? There's already a big battle for field time, and youth sports need to get out there. Right. All those things. Yeah, jobs. True.
Well, it raises the question: should athletics be driving what is in the best interest of kids, both academically and physiologically? And is that what we think? And that's an open and debatable question. But there are communities that have moved that. The state of California is moving in that. The entire state is moving in that direction. The schools that are in the Middlesex League have moved to later start. So you can speculate a lot about what might happen. It's a lot more grounding to look at what do we know does happen. What do we see happening? So, we know, because the athletic director told us, that we could start school a half an hour later, would have absolutely no impact on athletics. We're looking to start maybe an hour and 15 minutes later. So maybe it has some impact, but if all of the leagues are doing it, then you make those logistical adjustments. And the other thing is that if, a worthy investment in the community would be continuing to upgrade our fields. If we had more lights on more fields, there wouldn't be people having difficulty getting fields because you could use more of them. So that is a solution to that issue.
That is important too, though, because it is tough to do that if you're moving in one direction and a lot of the communities around you are not. Because if you are going to, for instance, just think about sports, it becomes tough to meet a team if they're still in school and they rush into the field.
What the superintendent has expressed is that he really believes this is the direction things are going in. Yeah. And you are always in a much better position if you can anticipate, if that's what's going to be, let's enter into it and engage in a way that works for us as opposed to having to respond to somebody else's mandates. Let's have a conversation about it in the community. Let's answer some of those questions. At some point, every community has to sort of take a leap of faith, but there are a lot of places where it's really working and making a difference for kids.
Absolutely. Again, we're joined here by Bruce Menin. He's the vice chair of the Port School Committee. When you talk about the school start times, I've heard this kind of conversation in the air, at least. I'm not sure how long it's really been a thing in Newburyport, but for several years now, this talk and, you throw the data back and forth.
It's been at least 3 years. There's been a local community group that's been very active for almost 3 years now.
Right, and it does seem to be picking up steam, at least on that front. I wonder how realistic of this. It's a big change. I mean, you're talking about people's lives. It's it's people that work, changing schedules, all that stuff. I wonder how practical is it? How long do these things take? I mean, could you theoretically see this change next year? Or
I don't know if I could theoretically see it next year, but what I can see in the next year is a conversation that addresses all of the issues, that deals with them, acknowledges what people's concerns are, and then the creation of a plan that says 18 months down the road, 24 months down the road, this is what we're going to be doing. And between now and then, we're going to change the schedule so that it slots into, when we make a shift, we'll already be in that place. So we won't be making a shift and then creating new schedules for people. I think that if you let people know how you're going to do it, and at each point at which you have another benchmark, you are finding out what other concerns people have and addressing them, talking about them. I think that you can get it done. It's not something that I think is going to happen next fall, but I think that it conceivably, to me, could be something that happens in 2 years down the road.
A very clear rollout is very important with these things, aren't they?
Yes.
You don't want to bungle them at the very get-go because, you lose faith that way, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
I wonder, so a lot of other issues are on your plate. I wonder that's probably one of the top ones these days as far as talkers go.
I think it is. We got very close to making a decision, and we pulled it off the table simply because the alternative that a working group came up with was not the best alternative. It just happened to be the alternative that wouldn't require us to spend any more money on buses. And, it wasn't the best one for kids because it had us shifting all of the schools later, or shifting the elementary schools earlier so that we could get away without having to hire an additional round of buses.
Right.
That's not the criteria we should be basing our decision on.
Gotcha.
So we're going to have more conversations about that. Maybe it costs money, maybe it doesn't. We've got to address the community's concerns. We have to address athletics concerns. And, we have to create a critical mass, I think, in the Cape Ann Athletic League.
Yeah.
Schools have to start talking about those issues. Some of them are. But let's bring it to the table and talk about how we want to make this thing work, because you want to make it work. There's two ways to approach a problem I've learned on the school committee. There's the way that approaches a problem by focusing on why it won't work. Yeah. And then there's the way that
you get
says,
a lot of that too.
And there's the way that says, indulge me.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a half an hour about what would need to be in place to make it work.
Gotcha.
And that, I think, is the way we need to frame this conversation. And it hasn't been framed totally that way. There were some groups that were encouraged to come up with reasons why it's not going to work, and other groups had a hard time hearing that and focused on what would make it work.
I'm going to start again. We're joined by Bruce Menin, Vice Chair of the Port School Committee. Off the air, we were talking during the commercial break about a different kind of vision, not for just you, but where a lot of schools seem to be eyeing a decade away, kind of a different format of your typical high school school day, which I had not really heard. It's kind of a new thing for me, more of kind of a college-based system. But why don't you explain what what you were telling me out there about, kind of 10 years away where you could see the school day?
I think that we are about to enter a period of time where the technology it's exponential in terms of the impact it's having on kids, the impact it's having on our world. It sort of happened, and I think part of our civilization struggle is we haven't figured out what the rules are yet.
Yeah,
we're doing it, but we haven't even. There's not a lot of philosophy about how you should be doing things, how you deal with this information. 10 years ago, the idea that a kid might post something on Facebook that is a violation of school policy. Who would have thought that? But yet, so suddenly the world, what happens outside of school impacts what happens inside the school in a much more dramatic way. So I think that we've got to really change a lot of different cultures, and one of the cultures that needs to change is the school culture itself. In staff, parents, students. We know, for example, that a later start time at the high school level aligns with the biological clock of adolescence. That they start to wake up at 8:30. That's when you should be working with them, not 7:30 in the morning, because it's just And you talk to any student or any teacher, they'll tell you your first class is a waste.
Yeah, really.
It's what they'll say.
Well,
because the kids just aren't there, and let's just acknowledge it. Science tells us they're not there. Experience tells us they're not there. They tell us they're not there.
And stop yelling at the kids at the day's half over.
Right. That's right. That's right. So let's do that. So the idea that we can accomplish a lot of what we want to do in a school day that is really narrowly defined, I don't think we can do that anymore. I think that the world has too many demands on our students, on our parents, on our district, on our teachers, to be able to say we're going to do this from 8 to 4. We're going to do this from 7 to 3. And I think the direction that schools and communities are going to move in is what's called flexible day. I think that the school day will expand, and teachers will still be working their 8-hour day or 6 or 7-hour day, but some teachers might start at 10 o'clock and work until 5 or 6 o'clock, and that is going to create a lot of opportunities. We've done some flex scheduling of classes at the high school, and it seems to be very, very successful. For example, we talked about this, the logic of running an astronomy class at 8 o'clock at night as opposed to 10 o'clock in the morning, it's unassailable. It makes a lot of sense. You can get kids out on the front lawn of the high school looking at what they're learning about.
Yeah.
So that has really worked. So it's entirely conceivable you could have a student come in, go to school for class from 12 to 3, then go to a job in the afternoon or go to an internship, and then come back and take another class or two before 8 o'clock. And I think it's that level of flexibility. We got to deal with schedules. We have to, make sure that the working conditions are very clear for teachers and negotiated. But that is going to really open things up. The other thing that we have to look at is blended learning. That learning we have things called flipped classrooms, where the teacher, in effect, their role, that students get assigned to do work online, and their work is done online, and the role of the teacher when they come back to the classroom is to go over the work that's done online. So they're much more independently pursuing their education. We're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more of kids learning the skills they need for the 21st century, and as a result of mastering those skills, they will inevitably master the content. I think we're going to try to move in the direction of not teaching to the test anymore, but teaching kids the skills they need to succeed.
And you have a big technological background as well, right? You brought that was one of the highlights I saw when you were brought on.
Sean, the new superintendent. I'm on the school committee. The superintendent.
Gotcha. I thought you were pushing for these technological advances.
Yeah.
Is it true, Lexi? Do you have not laptops, but do you have one of the iPads in class? The tablets. Some classes do, right?
Oh, right.
It's which is
right.
completely
the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to put all of our kids in a position that we're calling one-to-one, where every kid has a computer.
That is the ultimate goal.
That's the ultimate goal, I think.
High school
of any district. No, of the whole district.
The whole district.
Yeah, and we've made fits and starts, and we don't have sort of a master plan for that. But ultimately, we want a definition of one-to-one to be every kid has access to a computer 24 hours a day. That one-to-one isn't just come into school, we're giving you a Chromebook today, and then you got to return it back and plug it in.
Yeah.
That they should, because that's how learning is, that's how communications is. So we have to figure out how to do that. We have to figure out how to accommodate those kids that aren't going to be able to afford to do that.
That is a completely different classroom than what I grew up with.
Oh, absolutely.
Just our textbooks gone? Are they on the shelf? Or
textbooks are online now, right? How many textbooks are online?
But the actual physical textbook.
No, we have them, but they're. It's
going the way of the newspaper.
It's the textbooks stick around a little longer.
Yeah,
but the technology becomes absolutely obsolete.
Yeah,
and imagine this: when I first started on the school committee, this was our master plan for technology. We bought new computers at the high school and took the old computers and gave them to the middle school. The middle school gave their old computers to the elementary school. So you had elementary school kids working on computers that 20 years ago were 10 years old already.
Yeah.
And that just, you see how technology evolves with lightning speed.
Yeah.
So the idea of getting kids involved in a one-to-one situation is that is going to involve automatic updates of all the software and the hardware, and they're not going to have to replace these computers. And ultimately, they should own these computers and take them to school with them.
You couldn't hold back the smile with the idea of a one-to-one.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely great. Yeah. And to make sure that every kid has access to it, regardless of finances.
Right.
And we'll do that. I think that Sean would like to see that happen. The school committee certainly wants to see that happen. Mm-hmm. We want our kids to have every advantage that they've got going forward in the 21st century because, frankly, a lot depends on it.
Absolutely. What about the... I'm sure Newburyport is probably maybe doesn't battle this as much as some other communities, but I'm the husband of a teacher, and she manages other teachers and seems to consistently have a problem with being undersupplied as a teacher.
Yeah.
Going out there buying own stuff. I get to see it firsthand. It happens in my household, and it's I think a lot of people.
It's very simple mathematics. With a school district, I used to be a nonprofit executive director, and when you're running a nonprofit or a school district, 7/8 of your budget is salary. Yeah. That's what it is. You're only looking at a smaller part of the budget that is for supplies and running the buildings and putting gasoline in the cars and buying paper. You can't go in and say, we're going to cut out a salary here, because it means you're laying people off. You have to negotiate all of that. So in a sense, that amount of money, that large chunk of your budget is fixed.
Yeah.
If you negotiate a contract where your staff are getting certain percent raises over 2 or 3 years, you've got to have that money in the budget. And what has always tended to happen is that other stuff gets cut. When I first started, schools used to do great field trips.
Yeah. Great
field trips. At the elementary school level now, they don't do field trips unless the money is raised by the PTO.
So that's the first thing on the cutting block?
Yeah, you cut that stuff, and the community picks up some of that, and they have to. I was on the school committee that voted to charge athletic fees. We didn't have to do that before.
Yeah.
Now we have to do that because the state, for example, decided it no longer would fund transportation for non-regional school districts. So that was in one fell swoop. That was a $750,000 burden that shifted from the state to the community. suddenly.
So when you're talking teachers unions, this is something that faces every single district
single
across the country,
Right.
probably across the nation, really, when you think about it.
Right, and you know, you shouldn't have to rely on the largesse of a teacher or a parent to make sure you've got the supplies in the classroom that you need to get stuff done.
Yeah.
But that's where things are right now. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. One of the reasons is that the state developed a funding formula for funding districts across the Commonwealth in '93. It hasn't been adjusted since then. And you have cities that didn't exist that exist now. It's not a formula that covers a lot of expenses that have emerged over the years.
Yeah.
You know, and that has been really locked in. And it's a formula that I don't want to use the word privileges, but it's a formula that focuses a lot more funding in urban communities where there are higher need schools. So when the time comes and the state says, this is how much money we're going for education, Newburyport, Framingham, Gloucester will say, we could use really more money. And Lawrence and Lowell and Haverhill say, we can't afford to give up any money.
Yeah.
And the state's not coming up and saying, that's okay, we'll add money.
Yeah.
So it becomes a zero-sum game. And that's got to change. That whole funding formula has to change.
That can be a vicious cycle, and I'm sure it pains you guys from from the level to see certain things hit the chopping block. I mean, I know.
And you know, in any given year, for example, we have a moral and a statutory obligation to serve all kids. The goal is to serve all kids in the community. So when kids have special needs, your moral and statutory obligation is to serve them in the community in the least restrictive environment. You can't always serve all kids that way because some of them require very expensive, very intensive services. So you have to do an outside placement. Even though you want the kids to be in the community they grow up in, they should be. You have to do an outside placement. We've had outside placements for kids that are $300,000 a year.
Yeah.
And when you set your budget and somebody moves in November that needs a $150,000 placement, you have to pay for that. You have to figure out how you're going to pay for that. And that involves manipulating budgets and locking them down so you're not spending the money. The community has been very good. Newburyport has been pretty good about giving us more than 2% every year. But in one of Mitt Romney's last years as governor, they just said, we're making these cuts. And at the end of the school year, they cut funding that you had anticipated. It resulted, for us, ultimately, it resulted in probably laying off about 30 staff over the course of 2 years, and we lost about $1.5 million in our budget from the state. That's never been replaced. We've incrementally done that, but
still coming back from that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So you know, we had a state model world language program that began in kindergarten. Then we cut it out of the elementary school. And my daughter went through this. Every time my daughter finally got to world language level, we cut it.
Wow.
So she lost it in elementary school. She moved to the middle school. They lost it there. And then she got to the high school, and that's where. So for a number of years, our world language program is starting in high school.
Wow.
Which everybody knows. The data says start them when they're 3 years old.
Yeah.
But replacing that, you know, is it's hard to do.
It's a loaded topic, certainly.
It is.
Again, we're joined here by Bruce Menin, Vice Chair of the Port School Committee. Bruce, a couple final minutes here. I wouldn't mind hitting on a couple quick hitters if you don't mind. Maybe get through a little rapid fire round here. State of the School Committee right now. I saw you talk very highly of it recently.
Yes. It's an interesting school committee. I prior to this been Vice Chair for 2 years. Then I wasn't for 5 years. I am now. This is the first school committee that is totally testosterone driven.
Strange, right?
It's all men serving on the school committee with the exception of the mayor. It's the first time I've served on that, and I love all the guys, yeah. but there's a real value to having both genders serving on the school committee, and I really miss that. And I'm hoping that some of our interested women will think about running when the next election comes up in 2 years.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier teaching to the test. Your thoughts on MCAS? Is this going away? It seems like there's a big push to.
It's not going away, but there are other ways to accomplish what I think teaching to the test accomplishes. Today, the superintendent brought in a consultant who is doing a pilot project with a group of teachers who are going to create a curriculum that's rubric-driven, that identifies skills and identifies levels of skill achievement. And what the data really seems to show is that if you teach kids these skills they're really going to need for the 21st century, how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to be creative, how to analyze data, how to research. If you're teaching kids those skills, they then are able to take that and learn the material, learn the content much better. A, and B, they've got a set of life skills that really are going to carry them through the rest of their lives, as opposed to learning what the capital of Turkey is.
And even when it comes to like SATs, a lot of colleges are even starting to turn away
from that.
Show me what you are as an individual, as opposed to
and the beauty of that is that for students who may not be the highest academic achievers, but are good students, volunteer at homeless shelters or feeding shelters, are Eagle Scouts, are involved in the theatrical program. Those connections with the community are really becoming much, much more valued, much more so than SAT scores.
Yeah.
So we are moving, I think, in a direction where colleges are looking at the whole student, and they're looking at what are you bringing to our community as opposed to what do you bring to our bottom line.
Absolutely. Probably completely unfair to ask you this at the very end of our show, but charter schools,
sure.
In a quick synopsis, your vision of charter schools, your thoughts on charter schools.
I think that the educational, I think that our schools should meet the needs of all kids where they are. That hasn't always happened. So I do understand the idea behind charter schools, that there are kids out there who could benefit from different approaches, different ways, different focuses, different emphasis. I personally don't have a problem with that. I think that I have concerns that their oversight is strictly state oversight. And it's not that I don't trust the state to demonstrate oversight, but I don't trust the state to do the kind of oversight they need to do.
Yeah.
And the problem was that when education reform allowed for the creation of charter schools, there was kind of a switch in the language, and the charter schools were originally supposed to collaborate with public schools. And somehow, somebody changed that to compete. Change that one single word to compete.
All comes down to funding, right?
And then it comes down to funding.
Yeah.
It does come down to funding, and that's the problem. We created this whole new state-level educational system and didn't add a penny.
Yeah.
We took it out of the money that we were already spending. Mm-hmm. So in effect, schools that were working with students that were really struggling were given less resources, so that charter schools, which they were supposed to be accepting everybody, but they weren't necessarily accepting everybody. And for us, it's very significant. My understanding is that the charter school now gets reimbursement from the state that exceeds the for 220 kids, that exceeds the reimbursement that we get for 2,200 kids.
Really?
And that's the way that the legislature has wanted it. I think that needs to be reformed. I think that all schools should be serving all kids.
That's a discussion that seems to come around every single year, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Again, Bruce Menin joining us, Vice Chair of the Port School Committee. Thank you, Bruce. It's been a pleasure. We covered a lot of ground here today. Sarah tells me we could do a whole nother show on some of the other stuff you got your hands in.
Just let me know when you want me to come in.
Well, absolutely. Seems like fun. Anything you'd like to add? You got? I've been asking all the questions here. You got anything you'd like to add in the final 30 seconds?
No, I just want to say how excited I am. That we're doing radio here as well as community access. Sarah knows that I've been a long time supporter of it, and I was in radio in high school. I did radio comedy in high school.
Radio comedy.
And down the road, we're going to be doing some of that here, I understand, which I'm very excited about.
That's like
that's
an
another
all-time
conversation.
Teaser. That's an all-time teaser right
absolutely.
there. Absolutely. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that. Bruce, thank you. It was great to meet you. It's our first time meeting each other, so it was a pleasure. Covered a lot of ground, and on Election Day, nevertheless. So good day to have you.
Vote if you haven't voted.
Very good. All right. Bruce Menin, Vice Chair of the Port School Committee, joining us. Hope you enjoyed that. A lot of information there in a short amount of time. So that hour flies by, as they all do. I always say it's the shortest hour in radio. Big thanks to Lexi Foley producing the radio side. Lexi, jump on in. Say hello. I know the family likes to see you. There you go. There's Lexi. Thank you. Doing a great job on the radio side. And David Kramer on the TV side. He was climbing stanchions earlier and fixing speakers and plugging things in. And I don't know what he was doing, but it all seems to have come together. So thank you, David. That tends to be how our relationship works. Good job as always. And we will see you here Thursday. Same time, same place. The rain continues. Hopefully we get some better weather here in the coming days. But yes, as Bruce said, get out and vote. You got plenty of time. 8 o'clock. The polls are open till, so get out there and vote. Very important. Don't say your vote doesn't count, because it does. We won't beat that drum anymore, but get out there and vote today. Happy Election Day, everybody. We will see you next time. My name is Drew Moholland, and this has been Afternoon Drive on Joppa Radio. Bye-bye.